Okay, so we got some Fox 2.0 shocks for Roxy, our 2007 Jeep Wrangler JK two-door. We're going to replace those today, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the driver's side so you can see how to do it. The Fox shocks, you can see it's a great shock. It's a lot heavier duty than what came on there. Although what's on there is not factory, they're pretty well worn out and need to be replaced. Some of the tools that you're going to need: a 15mm wrench, an 18mm wrench, a larger 18mm wrench, an extension, a 18mm socket, a 5/8mm socket with a long extension for the rear shock, and then just a screwdriver or a pry bar, and then the jack. The jack is going to be used to compress the shock. You might be able to do it by hand, but they're pretty tough, and you know, I don't feel like pulling a muscle, so I'm going to use the jack to actually compress the shock when we put it on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the old shocks. You'll see mine are black. I've actually undercoated it recently and just kind of painted over the shock that was there because I'm taking it out anyway. And we're going to use a 15mm. I've got actually a little ratchet type wrench that I'm going to use. Just makes it a little easier because it's up on the top. You may need to hold the shock while you're doing it. It's kind of a little bit tight up in there. And we'll just go ahead and get that off with my hand. It's a little easier now that it's loose. Okay, so that's released. That's off there. So we're going to set that nut off to the side. And now we are going to, I'm going to use the impact wrench with a 18mm socket and an 18mm wrench to release the bottom. And for this I'm going to use the little bit larger wrench just because it's easier to keep a handle on. I have to loosen this one by hand because I can't get that wrench in there. And this, I'm using a 1/2-inch ratchet with an 18mm socket to loosen this up. I couldn't fit the impact wrench in there to get it loose. Okay, so once we have those out, we're going to remove the shock just by kind of pulling it out. And these old shocks don't really, you can see wherever you push them, that's where they stay. They don't come back out. They're pretty well shot. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to, I'm actually going to leave this plastic bag partially on the shock just so I don't bang it around and get it all scratched up while I'm putting it in. It'll get scratched up plenty after the fact, but I'm going to pop this little piece that's holding it together off the top. Let that expand out. I'm going to take off the nut. And the top washer and the rubber ring. Next step, I'm going to push this up in through the hole that holds the shock. I'm going to place the new washer on top, try to line it up a little bit as I'm pushing this up in. Get that on top. And I'm going to start the nut. Try to get that nut started good. And tighten that up as much as I can by hand. Meanwhile, I am going to move the shock kind of into place here. Alright, so that's as far as I can do it by hand. Now what I'm going to do is, before I tighten that up, I'm going to actually get this into place down here. I'm doing this while it's loose because if it's too tight it'll be snugged up against there, and I don't want to score this up as I bring it up. So I'm going to get the jack. I'm going to keep the bolt handy and my screwdriver handy. On the inside, I'm going to put my bolt up on the tire so I can have it handy. Alright. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to line the jack up underneath. Okay, so and as I get it closer, I'm going to try to wheel the jack a little bit over here so I can kind of push it in place. And I think I'm going to have to release the jack a little bit, bring it back just a touch, kick it back in. Okay, now I got it into the bracket. I'm going to move the jack out of the way. So I'm going to first of all get it lined up. Get this out of my way. Get it where I think it's in the right spot for the bolt. Slide out there. No. I have to rejack it.
What just happened?
I pulled it out and it dropped down, so I have to jack it back up. So I'm going to leave my jack handy next time, just in case. Okay. Alright. Now, I'll leave my jack handy here just in case. One thing I would recommend is not doing this on a downward angle like I am. It's the way my driveway is, so I'm just kind of stuck with it, but I wanted to film closely, so didn't have the luxury of being somewhere different. So, what I'm going to do here is try to get that in, lined up on the other side. Once I start getting it through, okay, I've got that through. I'll get this started. Okay. Now I'm going to go back up to the top and continue to tighten this in. Okay, so we're going to use our 3/4 inch box wrench to go ahead and tighten this down while holding the shock in place. So otherwise it kind of wants to twist it a little bit. Okay. Just a touch. Okay, so that looks good. Now we're going to tighten up the bottom with our 18mm socket and our 18mm wrench. So now we can tear off this plastic. I don't know if I really needed it on there, but I felt like I wanted to protect it from getting scratched up during the installation. Alright, now we're going to move to the rear shock The rear shock's a little different. Rear shock has two bolts that bolt up into the undercarriage of the Jeep. So we'll have to remove the other one first. So, first trick is to get it started. Putting our bolts back in up top. It's easier to just get them started with your hand. Okay. Try to get that kind of lined up the way I want it to go. Impact wrench. Okay, now so that wasn't too bad. You're basically just going to duplicate everything on the other side, and looking forward to driving this and seeing how much better it drives with new shocks and how it handles and feels both on road and off. It's always been real good off-road, but on road, little side-to-side rolling here and there, not too bad, but hopefully these shocks will be an improvement. It'll be a little stiffer. Okay, so we got done with putting the new shocks on the Jeep. It actually handles really well. It's a little firmer. Very nice. I'm very impressed. And of course, doing stuff by yourself allows you to be free.